1.3, multiplying and dividing fractions. So the goal for this lesson is to learn how to apply methods to multiply and divide fractions. Okay. Fractions come in two main forms. The first one is improper fractions, and we looked at these yesterday. And we said that the improper fractions are the forms of the fractions that we want to use in high school. And the other type of form was the mixed fraction, one with the whole number part and the fractional part, which is what you were very familiar with back in elementary school. So improper fractions have a numerator which is larger than the denominator, and that's how we identify those improper fractions. And mixed fractions have a whole part and a fractional part combined as one. And we tend to not use mixed fractions very much now in grade 9. Yeah. Note, in both reduced forms, the denominator will never change. When adding and subtracting fractions, step number 1, be sure to convert all fractions to improper form. Number 2, determine the common denominator. And create equivalent fractions. And number 3, add and or subtract only the numerator and keep the denominator the same. So this is just a kind of a review of what we were doing yesterday. Now, in order to multiply two or more fractions, do we need a common denominator first? Does the denominator stay the same? Well, let's look at an example. Suppose you find 1/3 of a pizza in the fridge and you eat a half of it. What fraction of the whole pizza have you eaten? Okay, so here I'm going to just draw a circle to represent a pizza. Okay, let me just move that circle a little bit here. Okay, and I'm just going to draw divide this pizza into thirds. So it's a fairly good representation of that. Okay, now, so we take a third. Let's say we take the bottom third down here. Okay, and we said we eat half of it. So I'm going to further divide this pizza into, I'll take each of my thirds and just, take half. At the same time, I'll just do the same thing to the others too, as well. So now we have a pizza in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 slices. Okay, and all we're doing is just eating a third of it. So this half of a third of it. So exactly how much of the entire pizza have I eaten? Well, if I just count the slices, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I have one of those slices, then I've eaten 1/6 the pizza. Okay, so how do I get 1/6 from 1/3 and 1/2? Well, it turns out that if I took 1/3 and I multiply by 1/2, I get 1/6. Multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators. So multiplication, this is a multiplication problem. Okay, now make sure all fractions are improper fractions and multiply all the numerators together and all the denominators together. The signs work the same way as they did with the integers. So multiplying an even number of negatives results in a positive, and multiplying an odd number of negatives results in a negative answer. So a negative. So let's do some more examples. Let's multiply each of the following. So 2/3 times 5/6. So all you do is multiply the numerators together. So 2 times 5 gives me 10. And then 3 times 6 gives me 18. Okay, but don't stop there. Check to see if you can reduce it, and I can reduce it. And I can reduce this fraction to 5/9 by dividing both the top and the bottom by 2. So reduce. Divide by 2. Okay, and 5/9 I can't reduce any further. Let's look at the next one. Negative 3 over 7 times 2 over 3. So if I multiply the numerators, 3 times 2, I get 6. If I multiply the denominator, 7 times 3, I get 21. And don't forget about your negative sign, so negative 6 over 21. Or you can put the negative sign with the numerator and say or negative 6 over 21. And don't forget to reduce. So if I divide the top and the bottom by 3, I can express this as negative 2 over 7. So negative 2 over 7. Let's look at part C. So let me just write here. So reduce, divide by 3. All right, so what happens if we have a bunch of more than 2 fractions now? There's 3 of them. So you still do the same thing. You multiply all the numerators together. You multiply all the denominators together. Keep in mind you have the signs is here as well. So here it is. So I'm going to do 3 times 2 times 8. You can use a calculator for this. So 3 times 2 is 6 times 8 is 48. And on the bottom I have 4 times 5 times negative 3, which is 20 times 3, which is 60. So negative 60 here. I have a negative sign in front from originally from here. And so I have negative 48 over negative 60. 2 negatives here cancel each other out. And so I have 48 over 60. Now, you check to see if you can reduce it. These are 2 even numbers, so yes, I can reduce them. Turns out if I divide the top and bottom by 12, you will get 4 over 5. Okay. All right. So, did we reduce the fractions to lowest terms? We certainly did. So make sure you can do that. Now, is there an easier way? You know what? There is an easier way to reduce to answer these questions. So let's look at the easy way. So 2 over 3 times 5 over 6. Well, it turns out you can reduce this if you look at the numbers this way, 2 and 6. I can reduce this to 1 over 3. Okay, and if I reduce it to 1 over 3, then when I multiply 1 and 5 together, I get 5. And if I multiply 3 and 3 together, I get 9. Okay. What about this one? Well, 3's can cancel, right? Because these are all being multiplied. You're allowed to cancel factors both in the top and the bottom. So here I'm just left with negative 2 over 7. And over here, well, let's see what we can reduce. Well, 3 can cancel with the 3 down here, and 8 can cancel with 4. It's reduced to 2 up here, and it's different than the last question. Is there's another negative in here. That's okay. So here we have 2 times 2, which is 4, and here I have a 5 down here, so 4 over 5. Now the only change I have to make is how many negatives do we have? So 1, 2, 3. So we have an odd number of negatives. So my answer has to be a negative answer. Okay. Let's look at something a little bit more complicated now. So let's look at D, mixed numbers. So for mixed numbers, you have to convert them back to improper fractions. So remind you how to do that. Take your 2, multiply. Take your 2, multiply with the 5, and just change the size of my thing here. So let's try 8. Okay. Okay, and multiply with 5, and then you add your 3. So when you do that, you get 2 times 5, which is 15, plus 3 is 18. And then you keep your denominator as 5. Oh, I'm sorry, I made a little mistake. It's 2 times 5 is 10. Sorry. So let me undo that. 2 times 5 is 10, plus 3 is 13. And the denominator is 5 times. So 3 times 6 is 18, and you add 1, it's going to be 19, and over 6. And don't forget your negative sign. And then you take your calculator, because these numbers get bigger. When you do 13 times 19, you get 247. And when you do 5 times 6, you get 30. Okay, and then don't forget the negative sign. All right. And I changed the size of my eraser too. It's a little bit too big. All right. So let's look at part E. So here's three mixed numbers. Let's convert them to improper fractions. So if I convert the first one, I get 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9, over 4, negative. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 2 is 14, so 14 on top, 3 on the bottom, negative. And then 6 times 2 is 12, plus 1 is 13, so 13 on the top, and 2 on the bottom, don't forget it's negative. Since they're all being multiplied, I'm just going to put brackets around each of these fractions to indicate that they're being multiplied. And now, instead of using a calculator at first to do all this, you could if you want, but you can look for reductions, okay, cancellations. So here I know that 9 divided by 3 gives me 3, so I'm just going to put 3 up here. And why don't let me just see if can I change the color? No, I'll do that next time. So here if I reduce 14 over 2, I can get 7. Okay, so it makes the numbers a little bit smaller. I can't do 13 divided by 4, it's not an even number. But I can now reduce it. So here I have negative 3 times negative 7 times negative 13 over 4. Okay, so I reduced the bottom to just 4. There's no multiplication now there in the bottom, but on the top I do have to multiply some smaller numbers now. And if I do that, I'll get an answer of, let's write it over here. So the answer is equal to negative 273 over 4. Okay. All right. Dividing fractions. So how do we divide two fractions? Well, this is a two-step process, very simple. The first step is to flip the second fraction. And step number 2, multiply. Multiply instead of divide. Okay, very, very simple. So here if I'm dividing this fraction by another fraction, you take your first fraction, you leave it alone, 3 over 5, you change the division sign to a multiplication, and you flip the second fraction. So it becomes 7 over 2 with your negative sign, okay? And then after you flip it, you follow your multiplication rule, and you just multiply the top and the bottom. So 3 times 7 is negative 21, 5 times 2 is 10. There you go. Part B. Okay, 8 over 3 divided by 2. Well, if you don't see a fraction like you see a whole number instead, you can rewrite it as a fraction. So 8 over 3 divided by any whole number can be written as a fraction over 1. So I'm going to write this as 2 over 1 because 2 divided by 1 is still 2, right? And then I'm going to follow my 2 steps and change the question to a multiplication and change the second fraction by flipping it, 1 over 2. And then you multiply the top and the bottom, so 8 times 1 is 8, 3 times 2 is 6. And of course, make sure you reduce it, so you reduce to 4 over 3. If I divide both the top and the bottom by 2. Okay, next one. Again, mixed numbers, we don't like those, so change those, changes that back to an improper fraction. So here I have 1 over 6 divided by, so 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7 on the top, and 3 on the bottom. And now here's my new question. Now, okay, follow the 2 steps. Write the 1 over 6, multiply, flip the second fraction, 3 over 7, and then carry out the same steps as before. So 1 times 3 is 3, 6 times 7 is 42. Okay, and then check if you can reduce that, and it turns out you can. If I divide both the top and the bottom by 3, so this will reduce to 1, and 42 divided by 3 is 14. Okay, what about this? Well, it turns out I can take, 3 over 4, multiply, flip the fraction, so negative 4 over 5, put the brackets around just to make sure we're not confusing the negatives here, and you multiply again, and you change the next one to 8 over 6. Don't forget the negative sign as well. Okay, and before I go further, I'm just going to see if I can make some cancellations. So 4 can cancel with the 4. Okay, 3/6 can be written as 1/2, so I'm going to just put the 2 down here. And yeah, and then let's do the rest of it. So let's see here. So here I'm going to have, even before that, so 8 can cancel with the 2 and give you -4, right? So it's going to be just -4 on top. So here I'm going to have -4 on top, and on the bottom I'm just going to have 5. I'm sorry, not so 2 negatives on top. It's going to be +4. Okay, so +4/5. So don't forget, I'm just going to highlight it here. You have a negative, and you have a negative. 2 negatives make a positive when you multiply them. Okay, or 2 of the same sign are positive. Now, let's carry on down here. Example 4 and 5. Example 4, Mr. Rojas is driving at 34.5 kilometers per hour. How far does he travel in 2.5 hours? Okay, so this one is, if you want to know how much is the distance, so the distance that I travel, what is it equal to? Well, it's equal to the speed times time. Okay, so how fast you're going and how long you travel at that speed will give me the distance, right? So 34.5. So if I have 34.5 kilometers per hour, and I multiply that by 2.25 hours, I will get my distance. So you can say here the distance is equal to that. Okay, and convert to improper fractions. So 34 times 2 is 68, plus 1 on the top is 69. Rewrite the denominator 2, multiply by 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9, over the same denominator 4. And when I multiply these two fractions, I'm going to get, so here I'm going to say equals 69 times 9, and 2 times 4. This is going to be, even I need a calculator sometimes, so I'm just going to get my calculator. And I'm going to do 69 times 9, and I'm going to get 621. And 2 times 4 is 8. Okay, and you just check to see, because I'm asking for a distance, we don't give distances in fractions, so what we usually do is just write out the decimal form, and if I divide 621 by 8 on your calculator, you'll get 77.6. Oh, what happened to my screen here? Okay, 77.63. I'll round to 63 kilometers. Okay. So you can make a final statement here and say, therefore, Mr. Rojas traveled 77.63 kilometers. Okay, example 5, how many hours are there in 2.25 weeks? So if you have 1 week, 1 week we have 7 days, Monday to Sunday, or Sunday to Saturday. And then 1 day we know is equal to 24 hours. So you can do some multiplication to figure out how many hours are in the week, so to go from 1 week to hours, right? So if we have 2.25 weeks, and we know there are 7 days in a week, so we multiply by 7. And we know there are 24 hours in each day, we multiply by 24. We're going to get our answer, okay? So 2.25, I'm going to convert that to an improper fraction. So 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So 9 is in the top, 4 in the bottom, multiplied by 7, multiplied by 24. Okay, what can cancel? Well, 24 divided by 4 is 6. Okay, so 9 times 7 times 6 is 378 hours in total. So 2.5 weeks has 378 hours. And that's it.